in my job, I often have inquiries come through in themes, and for this week, the theme seems to be toddlers who are waking multiple times a night. Now, there could be many reasons for why toddlers wake up multiple times a night, and when I'm working with families, I like to discount the most obvious reasons first of all. So, are they well? Are they eating enough food? Are there any temperature challenges? Any misalignment between how much day sleep they're having versus what's expected at night? Or maybe disturbances to sleep, such as obstructed airways, snoring, or any sleep pathologies that are becoming a bit of a problem. So once we spend some time delving through all of that and optimizing things as best we can, very often what it boils down to is that parents somehow feel blocked in their ability to say no to their little one. Now, of course, before people jump on me here, I just want to say it is perfectly okay for people to breastfeed their toddlers throughout the night, or bottle feed their toddlers throughout the night, or co-sleep or cuddle, or any number of things that they want to do with their toddler. So I'm just talking about the parents that come to me for whom any of these overnight activities they've started to feel that it's unsustainable. A common one might be, we've got a toddler who is eating really well in the day, napping well, but at night they're waking multiple times to feed, say either from a breast or a bottle. Or they might be waking up multiple times to be rocked back to sleep or held in arms to go back to sleep. Some people might be happy for their child to do this. But for others, by the time the child reaches 16, 17, 18 months and older, we're usually talking about really heavy kids here, and rocking these children can really take its toll. And of course, we have some toddlers that breastfeed beautifully through the night. They barely disturb their mum and they will just go straight back to sleep. But we also have the other end of the spectrum where we have kids doing 360s on the nipple and biting and just generally being a pest throughout the night with their feeding journey. So when I hear these stories, my first question, beyond sifting through all of the other factors that might be playing into it, is why can't you say no? Why do you feel like you have to keep on doing these things? Why don't you feel like you can just say, okay, enough's enough, we're going to find a different way? And usually what it boils down to is the toddler will cry and scream and just rail against any sort of boundary that a parent tries to implement. Now, there may be the complication of older siblings. Very often I see that parents are really wanting to keep their toddlers very quiet at night because they're worried about disturbing older children. So I definitely get that. But by silencing the child all the time, you may have to give in to the child's requests multiple times a night in order to sustain that. And yes, indeed, it keeps the child quiet and the rest of the family can sleep. But of course, often it's mummy, but the primary carer is usually the one that suffers the consequences of this child being up multiple times a night. So one of the first questions I often ask is, okay, so what would it mean for your family or for your children if you as a parent got a really solid night of sleep now that your child is old enough to not need nutrition or to be rocked or whatever throughout the night? And their answers are usually, well, everybody would benefit. I would be happier. I would be less resentful. I would have more energy. I would have a better sense of humour. Yet still there's that obstacle of how to say no. They can see what it would be like on the other side, but they don't know how to get there. And what this often boils down to is a misapprehension that all crying is bad. So anyone who's followed me for a while knows that I'm not into cry it out methods, Ferber, any of that stuff that involves leaving children on their own to process their big emotions. However, I never shy away from a situation where a child needs to release some frustration or emotion. But largely what we need to figure out is how those emotions impact parents, and do they have the capacity to support their child in the way the child needs to be supported through those feelings. Many times parents are trying to stop the crying and put the child to sleep purely because the crying is making them uncomfortable. They feel like their child crying is an appraisal of their parenting, like they're not doing a good enough job, and the child is crying and communicating a need, and that it's the parent's job to make the child happy again. But this is where I like to challenge that thinking and get parents to think about the purpose of crying. So in adults, crying is considered a healthy, normal thing, but somehow with children, it almost makes us feel like the child's being naughty or spoiled or manipulative. Or the other end of the spectrum, and we feel that somehow crying damages our children. Now, of course, anybody with several children or older children will know that there is always going to be moments in your parenting journey where you have to say no to your child. And it's normal for that child to object to that no. An analogy I often use is, look, if your toddler wants the matches or the kitchen knife, doesn't matter how much they sob and beg and cry and tantrum, you're not going to go, oh, okay, have the matches, then it doesn't really matter. And this is why as parents we have to get really clear on where our limits are. And if we're exhausted through repeated rocking, feeding, patting, shushing, whatever that may be that we no longer want to do, it's okay to say enough's enough. But we have to be prepared for the fallout. We have to be there for our children when they complain and say, but this isn't how we do things. You always rock me to sleep 10 times a night. We have to be prepared to be that soft place for those feelings to land. We are not damaging our children by saying, no, I can't do this anymore, but I'm here for you and I love you and you can tell me all about those feelings. And you know what? In most cases, when that message is delivered lovingly, peacefully, but without any confusion, we can then allow our children to express their feelings, offload those emotions, and allow crying to be that stress release mechanism that we know it is. But the key is, as a parent, is to accept that without interrupting or disrupting that mechanism, letting it flow, letting the frustration pass, and then allowing that peace and calm to move in. So if this sounds familiar and you often catch yourself saying, oh, my child won't go to sleep without this or that, maybe just ask yourself the question, have you actually asked them to? Have you actually followed through? Have you actually made it clear that you don't want to do whatever it may be? And this doesn't have to even be at night time. It could be something in the day. Have you actually sat with those emotions until they have naturally run their course and drifted away and made way for that peace and calm to move in? Because until you haven't allowed the child to process their feelings around whatever it is you're saying no to. Now, when I get parents to employ these tactics with anything concerning sleep, I always say I would expect to see improvements within the first 24 hours. I would never want parents to be trying something for weeks on end, thinking it'll work eventually. If it hasn't worked pretty quickly, so there may be an element that we're missing or a way in which we are not being helpful in coaching our child's emotions. When parents feel stressed during this process, that can make it really hard for a child to calm down and relax. So we really need to make sure that parents are well supported. They have absolute clear reasons for why they're saying enough is enough. And also a belief that sleep will come. A lot of parents say to me, he absolutely won't sleep unless I rock him or feed him or pat him, but I dispute that. Sleep absolutely will come. He's not going to stay awake all night long because you're not patting him at a certain tempo or you're not standing up and walking around the room with him. Sleep will most definitely come. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts. I think this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but if it's raised anything for you, please share your thoughts in the comments. I would love some discussion around this. It's a common topic. It's difficult to say no to our children, but learning the skill is something that you will learn through your child's childhood and into the teen years. It's not something that only has to be used once. You're going to be getting very good at placing those boundaries in a loving way and then helping them come to terms with where those boundaries lie.